Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We're going to be talking about growing Rounders for All. We're also going to be discussing how to create inclusive and engaging Rounders sessions where whether you or a club or team or league, you can hopefully come out of this session with some ideas which will help you to continue to engage your players and create an inclusive space for everyone. I'm Chloe.
And I'm Shona. I'm from Sport Birmingham.
And we are really excited to be sharing this session with you.
Cool. So I'm going to be taking everyone through kind of inclusive sessions and engaging sessions, and looking at how can we make sure that people really feel that they belong in a space. So I thought what we first do is just look at what do we actually mean when we use the words inclusive and engaging. They often, kind of take a big priority when we're having conversations about this, but there's not always the clarity on what this actually means in like plain English. So when we're talking about this, what we mean is that everyone in the space feels happy and everyone feels like they belong as their whole authentic self. We mean that everyone really wants to be there and is really engaged with the session. We mean that everyone's welfare and well-being is equally cared about. That doesn't mean that we handle everyone's well-being and welfare in exactly the same way. It doesn't mean that everyone needs exactly the same thing, but it means that we care about everyone's well-being as much as anyone else. We mean that individual needs are being met in individual ways. We mean that participants are able to like really get engaged, get into a good flow, kind of focus and get really engaged in the session. And we also mean that all of the participants have a voice, they have a choice, and they have a journey. And that language comes from the Play Their Way campaign. So if you haven't heard about that and you want to do some more work around participant, especially children's voice, do check that campaign out. So the difference between inclusion and assimilation. So when we use the term belonging, we use that language very deliberately. And this is a really helpful framework that's come out of some research. And it identifies that inclusion really sits when people belong as their unique, authentic self. So assimilation is the word for when someone is allowed to be part of the group, but you have to leave behind part of who you are. So you have to pretend to be like everyone else. And differentiation is when people are recognized as being individual and being unique, but they're not included in the core group. So this is also kind of called othering, where people are included ish in that they're given their own space, but they're not allowed into the main proper space. We're talking about is real true inclusion, where people are able to retain their kind of unique sense of self, and be included in sessions. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at, and we're going to dig a bit into how belonging comes to be. So it's worth noting that belonging, again, we're kind of talking about happiness. It's really about allowing people to flourish and really kind of max out on themselves, and be as happy and as authentic and as engaged as they really can be. And the PERMA model is a really helpful metric to kind of explore around. It came out of the School of Positive Psychology. It was Martin Silverman who kind of came up with this, and it's been tested in a whole bunch of different societal and cultural contexts, and it's kind of come out. And this is what it is. So the P stands for positive emotion, so feeling happiness, joy, contentment. E is engagement. So this is that real flow state. So we talk about flow state when you get really into it and like the whole time flies when you're having fun. That's what engagement is. When we talk about relationships, we're talking about the interpersonal relationships, which can get a bit challenging when you want to have really authentic, deep, meaningful relationships while maintaining professional boundaries. And that's something which we'll talk about a bit more in a couple of slides' time. Meaning, this is kind of your sense of purpose. So what are people showing up for when they come and take part in your rounder sessions? And accomplishment. So this looks different person to person. So what does achievement look like for that person? For some, it might be winning matches. For some, it might be hitting the ball. For some, it might be not getting hit in the face. It really could be anything. And it's really personal. So when we're kind of looking at this, we know that that sense of belonging can develop really organically, or it can develop very intentionally. and the culture really shapes and touches everything that we do. So it's why we really kind of wanted to touch on this when we were going through these topics for you. So let's start getting into it in a bit more detail. So positive emotions. So how does the club, team or league, how are you prioritising, encouraging and noticing positive emotions? Often when we're doing physical activity, it's easy to just go straight to doing the physical activity. But how are we taking that training time and using it as an opportunity to really check in with our participants? What are we considering a positive relationship and positive emotions between coaches or leaders and the participants? So is that trust, respect, openness, authenticity? It's possible to have all of those emotions at the same time, but what are the ones that are most important to us? And how can we create space for people to express their negative emotions in a safe way? So if you've got a young kid who's had who's been bullied at school, how are you kind of creating a space where they can talk about that? And with other adults, like often you'll go, how are you doing? And people go like, yeah, good. How often do we actually mean something else? Even with my friends of like 20, 30 years, I'll go, how are you doing? And they go, yeah, good. And I'm like, okay, how are you really? So it's how are we creating space for that? And then how are we not necessarily shoehorning those emotions into becoming positive, but how are we creating a space where we can help people to explore through those and try and form some positive emotions when there are sessions? So engagement, that flow state we were talking about. So how are you as a group, how are you engaging your members, and also how are you engaging your wider community when it comes to kind of drawing more people in? Engaging wider community is a huge part of that. If you are based in a fixed physical space, how are you engaging around the physical space that you're in, the work that you're doing, litter picks, that kind of thing, kind of thinking about how you're really engaging and being really open and allowing people to engage, and how are you really embodying that member voice in kind of your sessions. And what does that flow state really look like? Is it that you have a set warm-up that people can just join in and get into it? Is it about kind of getting people to focus on a specific thing? Is it about creating like that vibe? Like, what does that really look like? And that will change from club to team to league, because it entirely depends on who you are as a group. And how are you listening to people and becoming really participant led? I mean, that's what really engagement looks like, people feeling like they have a voice and they're being listened to. So how are you creating space to do that? Are you talking about a pre-season survey? Are you talking about a check-in at the beginning of end of each session? Are you talking about coaches and officials being accessible out of training time? What does that look like, and how can you do it in a way that also protects your welfare? Because you don't want to be accessible 100% of the time. That's a one-way track to burnout. Relationships. So how are you facilitating really strong relationship building? Are you creating opportunities for people to meet outside the sessions? Are you building that into the sessions? How are you kind of getting to that authentic of who people are and then building those strong relationships? And then what kind of relationships do you want to foster? So again, we were kind of talking about what kind of emotions do you want to really facilitate? What kind of relationships do you want to foster? Do you want ones that are all based on respect, deference, coaches being listened to? Do you want one that's kind of more on that kind of co-production? Do you want one that does feel really open, or do you want something that has some kind of firmer professional boundaries? And there's no right or wrong around this. It entirely depends on what your group is trying to achieve. In a space where you have hundreds and hundreds of participants, you probably don't have capacity to build really deep, authentic relationships with every single participant, and that is okay. That is allowed. It's not a case that if you're not having these really, DMCs with every single participant every day, you're failing as a coach. That's not what we're saying. In fact, I think that would probably be quite problematic. And how are you supporting people to stay safe in those relationships? So, of course, we want to make sure that people are having authentic and strong relationships, but also how are we making sure that people are protecting their professional boundaries? How are we making sure that we're spotting what's a healthy relationship and what's becoming a safeguarding concern, and really kind of navigating that? So that's not an easy one, and I can really recommend having a conversation with your local sport welfare officer if that is something which you're kind of looking to explore in more detail. Meaning, so how do you define your group's identity? What do you stand for? What are people showing up for when they turn up to your sessions, to games, to your leagues, and how are you connecting your participants to it. So having a really strong identity and really strong values as a group is really important for making people feel like they really want to be there and they're really committed to it. How do you embed that into your sessions? How are you bringing your leaders along? So if you have a core value of community responsibility, is it a case that actually at the end of each training session you're doing a whip around and a list pick? Is that something which you're kind of building in, really building in that why? And how are you really making sure that people actually get it? So when you have new people coming on board, is it built into your code of conduct? Is it stated in your values and behaviours? How are you really doing that? And then how can you safeguard that as well? We talk about safeguarding people, but there's also safeguarding the group and the idea and the entity. We're almost done. Accomplishment. So how are you defining success? What does accomplishment mean for you? And it's completely fine that these are different. We have some teams who are out there and they're really pushing for like success in the leagues and they want to win. And then we have others where it's more about social connection, supporting mental health. And that's okay. That's a good thing. To have different ideas of accomplishment and success. What does it mean for you as a person? What does it mean for your whole team? How can you bring that in? It's really helpful to articulate that, and it can also help avoid any kind of issues within teams, which I'm sure all of us that have been physically active have seen. An instant, I once got yelled at for celebrating a try too hard. I play rugby, and I was like, "Well, that was my definition of success." And they were like, "But we want to win," and I was like, "So that was a fun Sunday." And is there space for people to have their different senses of accomplishment? So if you do have kind of that conflict of one person who it's really just about turning up and having fun and getting stuck in and participating, and you've got someone else that's really about winning and they're getting frustrated that this other person isn't really pushing, how do you kind of navigate and balance that off? And it's not easy, but how do you create space for that and create that kind of understanding within your people? And then how do you communicate to people where their ambition doesn't align to yours, even within your committees? If there's other people who have different priorities, how are you communicating and continuing to work with them? And making sure that you can still keep kind of taking the team forward and creating a really nice atmosphere that people want to be a part of. So all of those things together, when you kind of consider that and reflect on how this can affect kind of your culture and what kind of vibes you have, it is really about creating that sense of like FOMO. People really want to be there and they don't want to miss it. And these are all ways that you can kind of start to explore that. It's not a kind of one size fits all. It's not the end of conversations, but it's a helpful framework to start exploring what your culture and how you and what people belong to when they're being part of your squad.
Thank you, Shona. So now's probably a really good moment to kind of pause for a bit of a reflection. So take a moment, maybe think about who isn't showing up to your sessions at the moment. Are there potentially, young girls who feel like Rounders isn't for them? Or are there older adults who might be missing out on the games? Also thinking about other demographics. So for example, those who are disabled, or those who are from culturally diverse communities, are they currently underrepresented within your leagues, club or team? Think about those faces that you maybe aren't seeing at the moment. This isn't about blaming anyone for why that's not the case, but it's about thinking about the opportunity to engage those players and welcome them into the club. And how could you start to think about engaging those individuals? So we're now going to have a look at some of the barriers to participation and hopefully look at some practical ways in which we can try and make Rounders more inclusive. So what stops people from getting involved? Well, these are some of the most common barriers, which include lack of confidence, transport issues, fear of being judged and therefore not good enough, time commitment, and even cultural or language factors. We know that the demographic across the UK, across England, is very wide and varying, and there can be different barriers in different areas. Within a city, it might be easier to commute around because there's good transport links. But where you might be a little bit more in a suburban area, it might be more difficult to try and get to sessions. So worth considering what the potential barriers might be, and therefore how we can try and make it a little bit easier for individuals to get to sessions and to engage in leagues. So how can we make sessions that bit more inclusive. Let's talk about some different solutions. So the step model is a really brilliant way to be able to adapt sessions. You can make those changes to things like the space. So that might be making a space smaller or larger to make the game particularly easier for a certain group. It might be to modify the task. So it might be that you play a more simplified version of a game, or you might use some simpler equipment. So, for example, using a wider edged bat rather than the regular thinner rounders bats. And consider the mix of people. So, could you pair individuals up with somebody to help support them, or think about, again, so adapting the rules to make sure that the game is a little bit more accessible. And there's some great resources which we'll share a link to shortly, which you can go and have a look at, of different adapted rounders games, which could be really great. It might even be something so simple as just slowing the pace down of a game, maybe even playing some walking rounders. Or could you maybe swap some of the equipment, like the balls? Maybe the ball could be, you could get a brighter coloured one, which might work better for those who have difficulties with their vision. You might also use colour-coded bibs so that people understand what position they are supposed to be in on the rounders field, and it helps the others around who are watching to make sure. So, for example, if somebody is supporting as an umpire, it might be really helpful for them as someone who might be visually impaired, to have someone in a bib who is the batter running around the field. So these are just little small adaptations that can be made that might help, and is worth trying maybe in your next session or your next league, in order to see if they kind of support individuals who might have a disability, as an example. Beyond some of the kind of practical tweaks as well, certain things such as just making sure that you're celebrating individual efforts, using people's names. It's all about making sure that every individual feels part of it. One of the things that I really like to do, so I'm a football coach, is that sometimes I like to bring in a theme. So it might be that it's Mental Health Awareness Week, so we might start a session by doing a check-in, or we might, for example, around Pride Month, we might run a session and go around and do our pronouns. And again, that's just a way that people might not have had an opportunity to introduce themselves properly. So it gives them an opportunity to do that and a space for that. I'm also a real advocate for using music. Music is a massive motivator. And from what we know about music and psychology and sport, it can have a really positive impact on people. Just imagine you're at a session and, I don't know, your favorite song comes on, and all of a sudden, you hit the ball for a rounder. That's going to stick with you. So every time you hear that song, hopefully you'll remember the amazing performance that you had at that moment. So using music is really powerful as well. And like I said, changing the bat can also be really helpful. Maybe even being a bit silly about it. So having a particular session or a tournament where you can bring your own racket. So maybe instead of using a traditional rounders bat, you bring a cricket bat, or you bring a tennis racket, something to change up that particular session. Again, makes it memorable, brings people together, and it's all about building those connections. So growing the game in your community. We really want to get more people playing. So maybe thinking about the different partners that you could get involved, one of which might be local schools or workplaces. You could hold, for example, a tournament which involve different workplaces in one particular building or one particular area. That could be a really great way of engaging individuals. It's important to use storytelling. There might be participants who attend your leagues or sessions who have great stories about why they got involved. Maybe they were really nervous and shy about the first time that they were coming to a session or a league, but actually after a while they made some friends. And those are the stories that people want to be able to hear and see, because that's the reason why they have got involved. Maybe even hosting a free taster session so that individuals who aren't sure know that there's no commitment and they can come and give it a go and see what it's like. Or even hosting community festivals where, again, kind of engaging with different partners and getting them down to come and see what amazing sessions are available in their area. And also engaging with local leaders and ambassadors. So, are there individuals in the community? Are there councillors who you can get involved? I also think that sport is a great place to combine with other organisations. So are there other sports clubs that maybe run sessions? So it could be a badminton club, it could be a football club, anything where maybe you could try each other's sports. That could be a really nice way of engaging people in more physical activity. Speaking to people and understanding why they want to participate. So engaging in those conversations with those who are already participating in your leagues or teams is a great way of understanding, you know, what does physical activity mean to you? Why do you play rounders? What do you love about it? And to try and use that as a way of promoting more people to get involved. So again, this is probably a really good moment to pause. So feel free to, you know, pause the video and to really reflect. Just think about what's one group that you'd like to be able to reach better. Is it, you know, individuals with disabilities? Is it members of the LGBTQ plus community? What's one change that you could make within your session or within your league that could help widen the reach or make people feel a sense of belonging? And what's potentially one person or organisation that you could partner with, whether it's in an event or whether it's an ongoing partnership, in order to try and bring more people into your club, into your league, and to expand the reach of individuals within your community. So we've had a look at some really great things. Shona talked a lot about the PERMA model and some real hard science behind belonging. And we've also obviously talked about, you know, different ways in which you can try and improve the engagement of rounders in your club or in your league. It's really important to think about it in terms of intentional. Inclusion is intentional. What that means is that we have to put an active effort in to try and make changes. So make sure that you take these ideas from today, go away and have a think about it, talk with your community within your clubs and leagues, and find if there's some small changes that could really make a big difference. Your clubs, your teams and your leagues can be a brilliant place where everyone belongs, and I have no doubt that already your club and leagues have been making massive changes for the individuals you've already engaged. So how can we make sure that we make that opportunity available to other people as well? The great news is that there's lots of support that's available to help you do this. You don't have to go on this journey by yourself. Rounders England provide some amazing resources, which I'm going to show you the links for on the next page, but also they can help you in terms of connecting you with other clubs and leagues, and hopefully can give you some ideas which might allow you to go and try those within your environment, and can also link you in with any of their campaigns and resources that are available at the moment and throughout the year. They can also advocate for you on a larger scale. And again, more information about that is available on their website, and can also support you in terms of your journey. So whether that is helping to answer questions, whether that's supporting with policies, whether that's looking at training if you want to expand your own knowledge, and also just being a listening ear where there might be things that you want to discuss and get advice on. So here are some of their links, which again, you'll have available through these slides, and that will hopefully help in terms of putting all of these things into practice. You can also find out some more information about Rounders England on their website. You can find out who the different members of their team are, and you can get in touch with them with any questions and queries you might have. Also within the active partnership, who myself and Shona work through, you can find out who your sport welfare officer is in your area. So through these links, you can go through the list of the 60 plus of us that are in England and find the ones in your local area to hopefully support you on a kind of more one-to-one basis if you want it, in terms of supporting with policies and maybe introducing some more ways in which you can make your environment inclusive and safe for all. All that's left to really say is a massive thank you for taking some time to join us today. This is the first step towards really showing your commitment to making Rounders an inclusive and safe environment.